Good time to bring in our first guest. When we last heard from Brian Brooks, he was known as the crypto-friendly regulator. The Office of the Comptroller of the Currency managed to get quite a bit accomplished under his leadership and brief 8-month tenure, including authorizing crypto firm Anchorage to become a federally chartered bank and publishing interpretive letters allowing U.S. banks to use stablecoins for payments and other activities. Joining me now is Brian Brooks, former acting comptroller of the currency. Welcome, Brian.
Hey, Christine, thanks for having me.
Great to have you here. So, Brian, what do you think of public companies converting their treasuries to Bitcoin? We have Tesla's SEC filing today, and MicroStrategy continues to make big Bitcoin buys. Are they becoming Bitcoin ETFs?
Well, it's a great question. I think for people who are invested in Bitcoin, it's exciting news. For people who are looking at the rest of the world, it's actually a little bit scary news, because I think there are reasons why the price of Bitcoin is rising so fast and why companies are replacing, dollar holdings with Bitcoin holdings. So just this morning, Christine, I looked at the money supply in the United States, and here's some shocking news that I'll bet you might have an instinct on, but you may not know these numbers. So did you know that the money supply in the United States since the coronavirus pandemic started is up 25%? And once this second round of stimulus is done here in the next few days, the money supply will be up 40% versus 12 months ago. That's crazy, right? Because if you think about it, the way inflation works is the more of an asset you have, the less valuable it is, which means if you have 40% more dollars, the dollars are worth a lot less than they were a year ago. And that would explain why a lot of institutions want to have Bitcoin sitting in their treasury, because it's a more stable source of value over the long haul, potentially.
Let's talk about Washington for a second. So despite the fact that Trump himself said he was not a fan of Bitcoin, the Trump administration is actually considered to be relatively friendly towards cryptocurrency, at least on the regulatory side. I'm curious what you think will happen going forward. How you think the Biden administration will deal with cryptocurrency? Do you think there will be a backlash, or do you think it will continue in the same friendly vein?
Well, it's really hard to know, because crypto is interestingly nonpartisan. Its biggest fans include both Democrats and Republicans, and its biggest opponents include both Democrats and Republicans. And so I think the better predictor is not Biden versus Trump. The better predictor is ultimately who has the strongest thesis for this stuff. And as I've said many times before, my thesis is that there is a thing about decentralization. It is both a freer technology, and it is also a more sound money strategy than central bank governed money printing approaches, which is kind of what we've done historically. Obviously, there's some people coming into the Biden administration who agree with that. If it is true that Michael Barr is my successor at the OCC, I think he's likely to have more of a thesis similar to mine on this. He has a background having spent some time on the Ripple advisory board, for example. And on the other hand, Secretary Yellen has said some relatively skeptical things about the asset class. So I don't think it's a partisan issue. I think it's more about who's a tech adopter and who's an innovator versus who isn't.
Brian, speaking of Ripple, you worked at Coinbase, you worked in the government, albeit for under a year. So tell us, is XRP a security, yes or no?
Well, these are complicated questions and matters of pending litigation, so who can say? But here's what I would tell you, though, which I think is the most important issue about XRP, and that is there is a difference, okay? There's a difference between the way in which an asset is distributed and the nature of the asset at a given moment in time. And I think the issue in Ripple that gets lost in all of the discussion is whatever happened in the original distribution of XRP tokens, 10 years ago, and whether that was or wasn't an unregistered securities offering, that's what the courts will decide. That's a different question from whether XRP today is a security. And the SEC itself has said that assets can change their nature over time as they achieve utility and as they achieve decentralization. So if I had to make a prediction, I'll just make a quick prediction, and that is that there is a settlement to be done here somewhere, and the settlement has to do with the distribution of the tokens so that existing token holders can continue to trade them and find value in them the way that they do.
So while you were at Coinbase and you were legal counsel there, how did you approach XRP? How did you guys look at it? Did you think about this issue when it was approved for trading?
Yeah, absolutely. And, without getting into any secrets, I think most of this is a matter of public record. When I was at Coinbase, we organized something called the Crypto Rating Council, the point of which was to risk rate these tokens from a securities law perspective. And the idea was to be a little bit like the Motion Picture Association, where, we weren't saying that PG tokens were better than R-rated tokens, but we were saying R-rated tokens are riskier, okay? And what we said about XRP was, listen, compared to Bitcoin and ETH, it has more hallmarks of a security, but we believed was still distinguishable from classic securities. So it was farther along the spectrum, but we did not regard it as all the way off the other side. Now, once the SEC filed the lawsuit, that of course changes the risk calculus. Well, I'm not going to say it was PG-13 or R or PG, but you can see we gave it a rating of a 4 or 4.5 on a 5-point scale. So not a 5, but definitely not a 2.
Emily, you want to jump in?
Yes, thank you. Going back to the Coinbase issue, would a Coinbase IPO force some clarity on this issue? Like, would it force regulators to just be more clear about what is a security and what isn't? Do you think that's going to happen?
I don't think so. And part of it is because the agency that's in charge of this is the SEC, and the SEC is first and foremost an enforcement regulator. So enforcement agencies like filing lawsuits, right? They do that one thing at a time, and there are hundreds of crypto tokens, as you know. So I think what's more important is for our community to start focusing more on what these networks are about and less on what the taxonomy of tokens is about. At the end of the day, think about it. The point of the Ethereum blockchain is to support all kinds of applications that involve smart contracts, right? And so the ETH token draws people to a network because the network itself supports so much utility. And you're going to see that with a lot of other networks too. If you focus more on the networks, people will get what it is we're trying to build versus these tokens, which sound like made up things, right? Snoop, Doge, I mean, come on.
It's a very real thing.
Brian, just getting real quickly about Coinbase, about the culture there. Do you think that the criticisms of the culture were fair?
I really don't. I have to say, I spent almost 2 years at Coinbase, and I found the senior management there to be nothing other than committed to product and committed to diversity. And I will just tell you, in the time that I was there, Coinbase became the first tech startup to join the Leadership Council on Legal Diversity. We hosted the very first Women in Color in Blockchain event in Washington, D.C., collaborating with people like Rashida Tlaib and other members of the Democratic Caucus. So I would just say, in today's environment, allegations like this, they definitely generate headlines, but that's not the company that I know and lived in for 2 years at all.
Brian, just wrapping up, you said you were taking a sabbatical. What do you have planned going forward?
Well, my hope is to do as much Coindesk TV as I possibly can, because that's really what kind of relaxes me and gets me up in the morning. Exactly. No, but look, what's really great. What's really great when you leave a job like I had is you have a little time off, but you also have a great chance to take a step back and talk to founders and investors and bankers across a wide spectrum of disciplines to kind of see what's going on out there. So I hope you have not heard the last of me. I expect I'll be involved in this space for a long time in all kinds of different ways. And look, there's a lot going forward. DeFi's up 200%, Bitcoin's up 350%. I mean, crypto and fintech and banking are all converging here, and blockchain is the infrastructure of the future. So we'll all be talking about this for a long time to come, I expect.